My name is Sadie. I'm 32 years old, and I never imagined I'd have to bury my husband Connor at such a young age. When his heart suddenly stopped that Tuesday morning, my world collapsed around me. Through tears, I called my family, desperately needing their support. Their response? They were too busy at Isabella's birthday party to come. They had no idea that weeks later, they'd be standing in my living room demanding half of Connor's inheritance. But they also never expected what my 8-year-old daughter Alexa had planned for them. If you're watching this now, please let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to support my channel. As Connor always said, family shows up when it matters most. Connor and I were college sweethearts. We met during freshman orientation at New York University. I was studying architecture and he was pursuing finance. Our first conversation happened over spilled coffee in the campus cafe. I knocked over his cup while rushing to class, ruining his economics textbook. Instead of being angry, he laughed and said it was the universe's way of forcing him to actually read the chapters instead of just skimming them. That was Connor for you, always finding the silver lining, always turning mishaps into opportunities. We dated throughout college, moved in together after graduation, and married at 25 after he secured his position at an investment firm. 10 beautiful years together, building a life brick by brick. Our daughter Alexa came along 2 years into our marriage. From the moment she was born, Connor was smitten. He'd rush home from work to spend time with her, reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character, teaching her to ride a bike in our driveway, patiently answering her endless questions about how the world worked. Alexa inherited his analytical mind and my creativity, a combination that made her wise beyond her 8 years. Connor built a successful career as an investment banker. He worked long hours but always made time for us. His careful financial planning meant we lived comfortably in our colonial-style home in Westchester, a beautiful suburb just outside New York City. We weren't extravagantly wealthy, but we had everything we needed and could afford nice vacations, Alexa's ballet lessons, and savings for her college education. Then there was my family. My parents, Donna and Richard, always made it clear that my younger sister Isabella was their priority. When we were growing up, Isabella got the newer clothes, the bigger bedroom, more attention at school events. My accomplishments were acknowledged with polite nods, while hers were celebrated with parties and gifts. I spent years trying to earn their approval. I got straight A's in school, graduated with honors from college, secured a good job at an architectural firm, married a wonderful man, and gave them their first grandchild. None of it seemed to matter. At family gatherings, my parents would rave about Isabella landing a client or getting a promotion at her marketing job, while my promotion to senior architect barely warranted a mention. Connor was my emotional anchor through all of this. He saw the pattern from our first Christmas together, when my parents gave Isabella an expensive watch and me a generic bath set. He never pushed me to cut ties with them, but helped me establish healthier boundaries. He'd remind me that I was worthy of love just as I was, that I didn't need to earn my parents' approval. Just 3 months before Connor died, we attended my parents' anniversary dinner. Isabella announced she'd been promoted to marketing director at her firm. My parents popped champagne and toasted to her success. That same week, I had completed a design for a new community center that had been featured in Architectural Digest. When I mentioned it, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and immediately turned the conversation back to Isabella. In the car ride home, I broke down crying. Connor held my hand across the console and said, "Your parents are missing out on knowing the amazing woman you are. That's their loss, not yours. We're your family now, Sadie. Alexa and I see you, all of you, and we think you're extraordinary." Connor had been experiencing some health issues in the weeks before his death. Occasional chest pain, shortness of breath during his morning jog, and unusual fatigue. We both dismissed it as stress from a big merger he was working on. He promised to schedule a checkup once the deal closed. That appointment never happened. The day before he died was unseasonably warm for April in New York. We took Alexa to Central Park for a picnic. Connor taught her to skip stones across the pond, and we took turns reading chapters from Harry Potter under an old oak tree. Before we left, Connor took a picture of Alexa and me with the spring flowers blooming behind us. He looked at the picture and said, "This is what happiness looks like. This is what matters." How could I have known those would be among his last words to me? How could I have known that perfect day would be our last as a complete family? The universe gave us no warning, no chance to prepare, no opportunity for proper goodbyes. The morning Connor died started like any other Tuesday. Our alarm went off at 6:30. Connor kissed my forehead before heading to the shower, while I went downstairs to start breakfast. Alexa was already up, practicing her spelling words at the kitchen table. I made Connor his favorite breakfast smoothie with spinach and protein powder. We were laughing about Alexa's science project, a model of the solar system where she'd painted Jupiter with glitter because, as she explained, even planets should sparkle. Then came the thud from upstairs. At first, I thought Connor had dropped something. When I called out and got no response, a cold dread washed over me. I ran upstairs to find him collapsed on the bathroom floor, the shower still running. He was unresponsive, his lips turning blue. I screamed for Alexa to bring my phone and started CPR, desperately pushing on his chest as I'd learned in a community class years ago. Those minutes waiting for the ambulance were the longest of my life. I kept performing CPR, begging Connor to breathe, to open his eyes, to stay with me. Alexis stood in the doorway, frozen in terror, watching her mother try to bring her father back to life. The paramedics arrived and took over, using a defibrillator, injecting medications, working with practiced efficiency. One of them gently pulled me away, while another led Alexa downstairs. They transported Connor to Mount Sinai Hospital with sirens blaring. I followed in our car with Alexa, running red lights, hands shaking so badly I could barely steer. In the emergency waiting room, a kind nurse brought Alexa a stuffed bear and some juice. I paced the floor, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in, bargaining for Connor's life. When the doctor finally approached me, his face told me everything before he spoke a word. Time of death, 8:22 a.m. Massive heart attack, caused by an undiagnosed congenital heart condition. Nothing could have been done, even if he'd been in the hospital when it happened. Words that were meant to comfort, but cut like knives instead. The doctor asked about organ donation, about funeral homes, about who could come stay with me. Questions I couldn't process. My husband, my Connor, my partner and best friend for the past 15 years was gone. Just gone. 40 minutes ago, we were laughing about glittery planets. Now, I was a widow at 32. Telling Alexa was the hardest thing I've ever done. I sat her down in a private family room at the hospital, held her small hands in mine, and told her that Daddy's heart had stopped working and the doctors couldn't fix it, that he had died and wouldn't be coming home with us, that he loved her more than anything in the world and would never have chosen to leave her. Daddy promised to come to my recital next week, she said, her voice small and confused. He promised to help me with my science project. My heart shattered all over again. I pulled her into my arms and we cried together, this tiny person and I, both suddenly missing the most important man in our lives. The hospital gave me Connor's personal effects in a plastic bag. His wedding ring, his watch, his wallet with our family photo inside, his phone with 67 unread work emails. I clutched these items to my chest as if they could somehow bring him back. Reality hit me in waves. In the hospital parking lot, I realized Connor would never drive our car again. At home, I found his coffee mug still on the counter where he'd left it that morning, his running shoes by the door, his indent on his side of the bed. Each discovery sent me spiraling.
I had a panic attack in our closet surrounded by his clothes that still smelled like him. My best friend Sarah arrived that afternoon after I called her with the news. She took over calling people, making arrangements, fielding the flood of messages coming in. She held me when I couldn't stand, made sure Alexa ate something, and started a list of things that would need to be done. Funeral arrangements, death certificates, insurance, words that should never apply to a 37-year-old man. When I could finally form coherent thoughts, I called my parents. It was around 5 in the evening. Sarah had taken Alexa for a walk to give me space to make the call. I held Connor's sweater as the phone rang, desperate for the comfort of my mother's voice, for my father's steady presence. "Mom, I need you," I sobbed when she answered. "Connor died this morning. He had a heart attack. He's gone." There was a pause, then background noise. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. "Oh, my goodness, Sadie. That's terrible," my mother finally said, her voice strangely distant. "We've been planning this for months. We're at Isabella's 30th birthday party right now. You know we've been planning this for months. Everyone's here." "I need you to come, Mom," I pleaded. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to plan a funeral. I don't know how to tell Alexa her daddy's never coming back." Another pause, muffled conversation with someone else. "Sadie, we can't just leave in the middle of Isabella's party. It would ruin everything. Isabella has friends who flew in from California for this. We'll come first thing in the morning, I promise. Just hang tight. Call Connor's parents. They live closer anyway." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband was dead and they were refusing to leave a birthday party. A birthday party. As if Isabella wouldn't have another one next year and the year after. As if my world had just ended. I'll never forget my father's parting words before he hung up. "Try not to upset Alexa too much. Children are resilient. They'll bounce back. We'll see you tomorrow." The line went dead, and with it, any illusion that my parents would be my support system through this nightmare. I screamed into Connor's sweater until my throat was raw, until Sarah came running back inside, until our kind neighbor Barbara from across the street came over to help with Alexa. That night, I slept in Alexa's room, both of us clutching Connor's things. His Harvard Business School sweatshirt, the leather bracelet Alexa had made him for Father's Day, the book he'd been reading with a bookmark still holding his place halfway through. Physical proof he existed, that he'd been here, that he'd been ours. My parents arrived the following afternoon, nearly 24 hours after my desperate call. They brought Isabella with them, all three dressed impeccably, as if heading to a business meeting rather than supporting their daughter and granddaughter through tragedy. My mother hugged me stiffly, patting my back twice before pulling away. "I'm so sorry we couldn't come sooner, but you understand it was Isabella's milestone birthday," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "These things take months to plan." I was too numb to argue, too exhausted to point out that death doesn't check social calendars before striking. Connor's parents, Martha and Richard, had arrived from Connecticut before dawn, bringing comfort food, offering genuine hugs, and immediately stepping in to help with Alexa. The contrast between our two sets of parents was stark and painful. My mother immediately started rearranging things in my kitchen, commenting that this tragedy was no excuse for a messy home, especially with visitors coming by. My father asked about life insurance before he'd even spoken to Alexa. Isabella complained about having to sleep on the pull-out couch and mentioned several times how her birthday celebration had been cut short. While everyone who's lost someone knows there's no real protocol for grief, my family seemed determined to make my loss about themselves. They criticized the funeral home I'd selected with Sarah's help, insisted on changing the obituary I'd written, and questioned the open casket viewing I knew Connor would have wanted. The funeral service 3 days later was beautiful in its heartbreak. Connor's colleagues from the investment firm came in solemn groups, sharing stories of his mentorship and integrity. His college roommates flew in from across the country. Our neighbors brought dish after dish of food. Connor's childhood friends spoke of his loyalty and humor. Through it all, I held Alexa's hand, both of us in black outfits Connor would have hated. He always said we looked best in colors. When it was my turn to speak, I somehow found strength I didn't know I possessed. I told everyone about Connor's terrible dad jokes, his passion for teaching Alexa about the stock market using her allowance money, the way he still wrote me love notes and hid them in my architecture blueprints. I spoke about his generosity, his patience, his unwavering belief in doing the right thing even when it was difficult. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, my father checking his watch more than once. They performed grief well for our friends and community, accepting condolences with appropriately somber expressions. But I overheard them during the reception afterward, standing with Isabella in the corner, discussing Connor's financial situation. "Do you think he left everything properly arranged?" my father asked. "Sadie's never been good with money. Remember how she nearly maxed out her credit cards in college?" Isabella nodded. "Plus, there's the house. It must be worth at least $800,000 in that neighborhood. And his job, investment bankers make good money. There'll be life insurance, too. We should help her manage it," my mother added, for Alexa's sake, of course. I walked away before they saw me, physically ill at their calculations, barely hours after we'd put Connor in the ground. That evening, we held a small family dinner at my house. As we picked at food none of us really wanted, Isabella suddenly stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I know this isn't the best timing," she announced, a diamond ring suddenly visible on her left hand. "But Sean proposed last night and I said yes! We're thinking a December wedding. I'll need your help planning it, Mom. The venue I want books up a year in advance, so we'll need to put down deposits soon." My mother squealed with delight, my father beamed with pride, and just like that, the focus shifted completely from Connor's death to Isabella's engagement. Connor's parents exchanged uncomfortable glances across the table, while Alexa silently pushed food around her plate. Later that evening, as everyone was settling in for the night, I received a call from Eleanor Jenkins, Connor's lawyer. She expressed her condolences and explained that Connor had updated his will just last year. She needed to schedule a reading of the will as soon as possible, as there were specific instructions from Connor that needed to be addressed promptly. When I mentioned this to my parents the next morning, their demeanor toward me shifted subtly. My mother offered to help with Alexa more, suggesting I rest and take care of myself. My father proposed staying an extra day to help sort through Connor's paperwork. Isabella suddenly remembered fond stories of Connor she wanted to share with Alexa. Their newfound attentiveness made my skin crawl. Connor's mother noticed it too, pulling me aside while everyone else was in the living room. "Sadie, sweetheart, you and Alexa should come stay with us for a while. Get away from this, from all this." She gestured vaguely toward my family. "Richard and I have plenty of room, and it might help Alexa to be somewhere without so many reminders." I nearly accepted on the spot, recognizing the genuine concern in her eyes. But Alexa needed stability, her own bed, her familiar surroundings, and I needed to face whatever was coming next, not run from it. I didn't know then how right Martha's instincts were, nor how much worse things would get before they got better.
A week after the funeral, I met with Eleanor Jenkins at her downtown office. Alexa was at school, my first attempt at restoring some normalcy to her routine. Connor's parents had returned to Connecticut but called daily. My parents and Isabella had finally gone back to their homes in New Jersey, giving me a brief respite from their particular brand of support. Eleanor was in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had likely witnessed every type of family drama imaginable in her long legal career. She'd been Connor's lawyer since he first started at the investment firm and had helped us draft our wills after Alexa was born. "Sadie, Connor was very thorough in his estate planning,"
she began after we settled in her office with cups of tea. He wanted to ensure you and Alexa would be taken care of if anything happened to him. She outlined the details. Connor had left a substantial estate worth approximately $3.2 million. This included our home, his investment portfolio, retirement accounts, and a life insurance policy worth $1 million. Everything was left to me, with a trust established for Alexa's education and future needs that would be accessible to her at 25. I felt no joy at learning about our financial security, only a profound sadness that Connor had been so careful to protect us for a future without him, a future I'd never imagined possible until now. I returned home with a folder of documents, my mind spinning with executor duties and account transfers. I'd barely set my keys down when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing on the porch, Isabella slightly behind them. They hadn't called to say they were coming back. I opened the door, genuinely confused by their presence. My mother pushed past me with a too bright smile. "We thought you might need some company after the will reading," she said, already making herself at home in my kitchen. "Your father and I have been talking, and we want to help you manage all this. It must be overwhelming." Isabella set her designer handbag on my counter and added, "We can stay a few days if you need us to. I brought some bridal magazines so we can start looking at options together. It might take your mind off things." I stood there, keys still in hand, wondering when my family had ever offered to stay and help before. Even when Alexa was born, my mother had visited for exactly 2 days before declaring that newborns were too disruptive to her sleep schedule. We ordered Chinese food for dinner, making awkward small talk about neighbors and relatives. My father kept steering the conversation toward Connor's work, the house, and what plans the investment firm had for clients of deceased partners. My mother asked pointed questions about whether I planned to go back to work or if I'd live off the insurance money. After Alexa went to bed, having endured an hour of Isabella showing her flower girl dresses and explaining her important role in the upcoming wedding, my father finally revealed their true purpose. "Sadie," he began, setting down his wine glass with the precision of someone about to make a business proposal. "Your mother and I have been discussing your situation, and we think we have a solution that will benefit everyone." I waited, a knot forming in my stomach. "We'd like you to consider giving us 50% of Connor's estate. After all, we raised you, put you through college, helped with the down payment on your first apartment. In many ways, we invested in the life you and Connor built." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. My mother nodded encouragingly. "It makes perfect sense," she added. "You and Alexa don't need all that money. You'll remarry eventually and your new husband can help support you. Meanwhile, we're approaching retirement and Isabella needs help with her wedding and a down payment on a house with Sean." Isabella leaned forward, her engagement ring catching the light. "Sean and I found the perfect venue, but the deposit is $30,000, and I've always dreamed of a designer dress. Plus, Mom and Dad deserve to enjoy their retirement years after everything they've done for us." I felt as though I'd stepped into an alternate reality. My husband was barely cold in his grade, and my family was asking for his money. Money meant to secure his daughter's future. "You can't be serious," I finally managed to say. But they were dead serious. For the next hour, they outlined all the ways they deserved a portion of Connor's estate, how they'd always supported me, how family helps family, how Alexa was just a child and wouldn't know the difference between 1 million and 3 million when she got older. When I refused, my father's tactics turned uglier. He brought up times they'd loaned me money in college, gifts they'd given over the years, family obligations, and loyalty. My mother suggested that Connor would have wanted to help the family, that I was being selfish, just like when I was a child and wouldn't share my toys. The argument grew heated. I reminded them they hadn't even come when Connor died, that they'd always favored Isabella, that Connor had worked incredibly hard to provide for his wife and daughter. Isabella accused me of jealousy over her engagement and suggested therapy for my grief, which was clearly making me irrational. What none of them realized was that Alexa had woken up and was sitting at the top of the stairs listening to every word. I only discovered this later when she asked me why Grandma and Grandpa wanted Daddy's money more than they wanted to help us feel better. My father eventually stood up, towering over me, as he had when I was a child, and had disappointed him. You have 24 hours to reconsider, Sadie. This is about family loyalty. If you refuse to help us, don't expect us to be there for you in the future. They left with promises to return the next day, expecting me to come to my senses overnight. As I locked the door behind them, I leaned against it and slid to the floor, overcome with a mixture of rage, disbelief, and a strange sense of clarity. Connor had been right all along about my family, and I'd been too desperate for their approval to see it.
After my family left, I broke down completely. The armor I'd maintained for Alexa's sake finally shattered. I sobbed on the kitchen floor, great heaving cries that felt ripped from the deepest part of me. The betrayal of my family, the crushing loneliness of widowhood, the terror of raising Alexa alone, all of it poured out in a flood I could no longer contain. I didn't hear Alexa come downstairs until I felt her small arms wrap around my shoulders. Her strawberry-scented shampoo, the one Connor always used when he gave her baths, filled my senses. "It's okay, Mommy," she whispered, patting my hair the way I did when she was upset. "Daddy always said that sometimes you have to cry to make room for being brave again." Her words, so clearly echoing Connor's wisdom, both broke and mended something in me. I held her tightly, this tiny person who was half him, half me, all wisdom beyond her years. "I'm sorry you heard all that," I told her when I could speak again. "Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Isabella, they're just confused right now." Alexa pulled back and looked at me with Connor's serious blue eyes. "They're not confused, Mommy. They're being greedy. Daddy said being greedy means wanting things that belong to others more than you want people to be happy." The next morning, Alexa disappeared into her room with her art supplies, saying she was working on a special project. I let her have that space while I called Eleanor to ask about my parents' claims. "Sadie, they have absolutely no legal right to Connor's estate," Eleanor assured me. "Connor was very clear about his wishes. Everything goes to you and Alexa. Your parents can't challenge that successfully, regardless of what they might threaten." Her confirmation gave me the strength I needed to prepare for their return. I spent the day putting Connor's important documents in the safe, changing passwords on our accounts, and taking photos of valuables just in case. I didn't think my parents would steal from me, but then again, I never thought they'd demand half of my dead husband's estate either. They returned the following afternoon, exactly 24 hours later as promised. This time, Isabella brought her fiancé, Sean, a quiet man who worked in finance and who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the visit progressed. My father had brought a draft agreement his lawyer friend had written up, already assuming my compliance. "Have you come to your senses?" my father asked as soon as they were seated in my living room. His tone was that of a parent addressing a stubborn child, not a man speaking to his grieving daughter. "I've spoken with Connor's lawyer," I replied calmly. "There's nothing to discuss. The estate belongs to Alexa and me, as Connor intended." My mother sighed dramatically. "Sadie, always so difficult. This isn't just about the money. This is about families supporting each other. Isabella needs help with her wedding, and your father and I aren't getting any older." Isabella jumped in, describing the Vera Wang dress she had her eye on, the honeymoon in Bali she and Sean were planning, how a proper start to their marriage required financial stability. Sean shifted uncomfortably beside her, but said nothing. "You have a good job, Isabella," I pointed out, "and Sean works in finance. You both make six-figure salaries. But we have student loans, and the housing market is so expensive. It's not fair that you get all this money just because your husband died." Her words hung in the air, their cruelty stunning even Sean, who visibly flinched. My father leaned forward, changing tactics. "We've always been there for you, Sadie. When you struggled in college, when you needed help with Alexa. Family means reciprocity. Your mother and I sacrificed so much for you girls." "What sacrifices exactly?" I asked, a lifetime of suppressed questions finally finding voice.
You missed my college graduation because Isabella had a dance recital. You forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. When I called to tell you Connor had died, you refused to leave Isabella's birthday party." My mother bristled. "That's ancient history, Sadie. You always were one to hold grudges. We're talking about now, about being practical." The argument continued to escalate, voices rising, old wounds reopening. Isabella brought up childhood slights, twisted to make her the victim. My parents toggled between guilt trips and veiled threats about family loyalty. None of us noticed Alexa standing in the doorway until she stepped fully into the room, holding a large manila envelope to her chest. She wore the special dress I'd bought her for her last birthday, her hair neatly brushed, her expression solemn beyond her 8 years. The room fell silent as she walked directly to my parents, her posture straight and dignified in a way that painfully echoed her father. "Grandma and Grandpa," she said clearly, "this is for you." She held out the envelope. "This is why you came here, right?" My father took the envelope, confusion mixing with anticipation on his face. Perhaps he thought I'd reconsidered, that the envelope contained a check or transfer papers. Isabella leaned forward eagerly, already mentally spending money that wasn't hers. When my father opened the envelope, he pulled out not financial documents, but a crayon drawing and a handwritten letter. The drawing showed a stick figure family, Alexa, Connor, and me holding hands with sunshine above us. In a separate corner, smaller figures labeled Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Isabella stood apart, surrounded by dollar signs. As my father began to read the letter, his hands started to shake visibly. My mother peered over his shoulder, her face draining of color.
The letter that would change our family forever was written in Alexa's careful third-grade penmanship. "Dear Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Isabella, my daddy died 8 days ago. He was the best daddy in the world. He taught me that family means loving each other and being there when someone is sad. He said money is just paper, but time together is the real treasure. When Daddy died, you didn't come right away because Aunt Isabella's birthday party was more important. That made Mommy cry more. Now you want Daddy's money instead of helping us miss him together. Daddy told me once that you can tell what people really care about by watching what they do, not listening to what they say. I see what you care about now. I don't want you to have Daddy's money. He worked hard for me and Mommy, but I will share my time with you if you want to be real family again. Love, Alexa." Postscript: Daddy is watching from heaven, and I think he is disappointed. The silence in the room was absolute. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face flushed deep red, then pale. Isabella stared at the floor. Sean had moved several inches away from her on the couch, studying Alexa with newfound respect. Alexis stood there waiting for a response, her small shoulders squared with courage I envied. When none came, she added in a clear voice, "Daddy always said we should use our words to tell the truth, even when it's hard." Something broke open in me then, something that had been bound by years of seeking approval, of making excuses, of accepting less than I deserved from the people who should have loved me most. I stood and moved beside my daughter, placing my hands on her shoulders. "I think you should leave now," I said to my parents and Isabella, my voice steady and sure in a way it had never been before. Connor left this money to secure my daughter's future and to make sure I could provide for her without him. It's not a community resource for the family to divide. It's his final act of love and protection for us. "But," my mother began, her voice quavering. I held up my hand. "No, there's nothing more to discuss. You've shown me exactly who you are and what matters to you. I won't subject Alexa to that anymore. Please leave my house and don't come back until you're ready to be the family Alexa described in her letter, the kind that shows up when it matters, not just when there's something to gain." My father stood abruptly, his face a mask of anger and embarrassment. "You'll regret this, Sadie. Family is all you have now." "No," I replied. "Family is people who love and support each other unconditionally. By that definition, you stopped being family a long time ago. I was just too afraid of being alone to admit it."
They left in a flurry of slammed doors and screeching tires. Isabella crying theatrical tears, my parents promising I'd hear from their lawyer. Sean lingered just long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry," as he passed, his eyes communicating a deeper understanding than his words. When they were gone, Alexa looked up at me, suddenly seeming very young again. "Was I bad, Mommy?" I knelt down to her level, cupping her face in my hands. "No, sweetheart, you were brave and honest, just like your daddy taught you to be. I'm so proud of you." She nodded solemnly. "Do you think they'll learn to be real family again?" I didn't have the heart to tell her what I truly believed, that some people are incapable of change, that some relationships are too broken to repair. Instead, I said, "I don't know, honey, but what I do know is that you and I are a family, a real one, and we have Grandma Martha and Grandpa Richard and Aunt Sarah and all the people who have been bringing us food and checking on us. Family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose." That night we slept in my bed together, Alexa curled up against me, her breathing steady and trusting. I felt simultaneously hollowed out and filled up, as if I had lost one family and discovered the true meaning of another all in the same day. The days following the confrontation brought a strange mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that I'd finally stood up to my family's manipulation. Guilt that I'd deprived Alexa of relationships with her grandparents and aunt, complicated as those relationships might be. The guilt was irrational, I knew that intellectually, but grief is rarely rational. I had my first major panic attack 3 days after they left. I was sorting through Connor's clothes, deciding what to donate and what to keep, when I found the tie Alexa had given him for Father's Day last year. Navy blue with tiny yellow ducks. It was hideous and perfect, and Connor had worn it proudly to work the next day, sending me photos of his colleagues' reactions. Holding that tie, I suddenly couldn't breathe, couldn't stand, couldn't process that he would never wear it again. Sarah found me curled on the closet floor, hyperventilating among his suits. She helped me up, guided me through breathing exercises, and then gently suggested therapy for both Alexa and me. She'd already researched grief counselors specializing in children and young widows, compiled a list of names and numbers. This was love, I realized. Not the conditional approval my parents offered, but this practical, thoughtful support that anticipated needs before I could even articulate them. Connor's parents called daily, their concern genuine and undemanding. They invited us for weekend visits, but understood when I said Alexa needed routine right now. They sent care packages with homemade cookies, books on grief appropriate for Alexa's age, and once a beautiful wind chime for our backyard patio where Connor used to grill.
In these small ways, I began to see the outlines of our support system, the family we had beyond blood relations. Our neighbor Barbara, who still brought dinner every Monday. Connor's colleague Michael, who came over to mow the lawn and fix the leaky faucet Connor had been meaning to repair. Alexa's teacher, Miss Thompson, who sent home extra art supplies, knowing that creating helped Alexa process her feelings. A month after the confrontation, Isabella called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up on the final ring. "Sadie?" Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything at your house, and before that too. I remained silent, not ready to offer absolution. "Sean and I have been talking," she continued, filling the silence. "He was really upset about how we all treated you. He said if that's how my family behaves, he's not sure about the wedding. It made me think about things differently." Still, I said nothing. "Mom and Dad are still angry," she admitted. "They're talking about contesting the will, but their lawyer told them they have no grounds. I don't think they'll actually do anything. They're just saving face." "What do you want, Isabella?" I finally asked, too tired for games. "I think I want to be a better sister," she said after a pause, "and a better aunt to Alexa. Not right away. I understand you need space,
but maybe someday. I set a clear boundary. I would consider rebuilding a relationship with her separately from our parents, but it would take time and effort on her part. She would need to respect Alexa's feelings and my decisions. No more competition, no more enabling our parents' favoritism. To my surprise, she agreed to my terms. It was the first adult conversation we'd ever had. My parents attempted reconciliation in their own way, sending expensive gifts to Alexa and leaving voicemails about family obligations. I returned the gifts with a note explaining that we needed genuine apologies and changed behavior, not bribes. The voicemails went unanswered. Connor's childhood friend, Michael, became an unexpected source of support during this time. As a partner at a different law firm than Eleanor's, he offered to review any legal communications from my parents, though none materialized beyond blustering threats. He also helped me understand the financial aspects of my new situation, explaining investment strategies and tax implications in simple terms. 6 weeks after Connor's death, I found a locked drawer in his desk containing a journal and a stack of sealed envelopes. The journal detailed his thoughts about our life together, his hopes for Alexa's future, and, heartbreakingly, his suspicions about his health in those final weeks. The envelopes were labeled for Alexa's future milestones: 16th birthday, high school graduation, college graduation, wedding day, first child. He'd written letters for her to open at each occasion, sharing the wisdom and love he wouldn't be able to give in person. I sobbed for hours after finding them, both devastated by this tangible reminder of all Alexa would miss and deeply grateful for Connor's foresight, his determination to parent her even in absence. Memorial Day was our first major holiday without Connor. Normally, we would have hosted a barbecue in our backyard, Connor manning the grill while entertaining guests with stories. Instead, Alexa and I accepted an invitation from Sarah and her husband to join their family gathering. We brought Connor's famous potato salad, made from his mother's recipe. When someone raised a toast to absent friends, I felt Alexa's small hand slip into mine beneath the table. In June, I returned to work part-time at my architectural firm. My colleagues had been incredibly understanding, keeping my projects on hold and redistributing only what was absolutely necessary. Being back at my drafting table brought a different kind of healing, a reminder that I still had value and purpose beyond my grief. Alexa's school year ended with a project where each student created a memory book about someone important in their life. She chose to make hers about Connor, filling it with photos and stories and things he'd taught her. Her teacher, Miss Thompson, called me personally to let me know how brave she thought Alexa had been to share it with the class, and how it had helped the other children understand her loss. One evening, while organizing Connor's home office, I discovered a folded paper titled Bucket List. It contained 25 experiences he'd wanted to have in his lifetime, from visiting the Grand Canyon to learning to play guitar to seeing the Northern Lights. Only 7 items were crossed off. I showed the list to Alexa the next morning at breakfast. I asked her if she would think about trying to finish Daddy's bucket list for him. We could do the things he wanted to do, take pictures, and maybe make a special book about our adventures. Her eyes lit up for the first time since Connor died. "Can we start with the Grand Canyon?" she asked me. "Daddy always said he wanted to see it at sunset." And so in July, 3 months after losing Connor, Alexa and I stood at the rim of the Grand Canyon as the sun painted the ancient rocks in shades of gold and crimson. I took a photo of Alexa with her arms outstretched, the vastness of the canyon behind her. She'd insisted on bringing Connor's favorite baseball cap, which she wore despite it being too large for her small head. "We're doing it, Daddy," she whispered to the horizon. "We're seeing it for you." That trip marked a turning point for us, a shift from surviving each day to finding moments of joy again. We started a memorial garden in our backyard, planting Connor's favorite sunflowers and blue hydrangeas. Alexa would talk to the flowers sometimes, telling them about her day, as if reporting to her father. Support continued to arrive in unexpected ways. Connor's colleagues established a college scholarship in his name at his alma mater. Our community organized meal deliveries for months longer than is customary. His running group invited me to their annual charity 5K, walking beside me at my pace rather than racing ahead. Most surprising was discovering, through conversations with Eleanor, that Connor had anticipated potential issues with my family. He documented their previous behaviors, noted their reactions to our financial milestones, and left explicit instructions to protect Alexa's inheritance from exactly the kind of claims they had attempted to make. He knew them better than I'd allowed myself to and had prepared accordingly. This is what real love looks like, I realized. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but this careful, thoughtful protection that extended beyond his own life. Connor knew exactly who my parents were, and instead of trying to change my mind about them, he'd simply made sure they could never hurt us financially after he was gone.
A year after Connor's death, Alexa and I held a small memorial service in our backyard. We invited only those who had truly supported us through that terrible year. Connor's parents, Sarah and her family, Michael, Miss Thompson, neighbor Barbara, and a handful of others who had become our chosen family. Not a crowd, but the right people. We released biodegradable lanterns into the evening sky, each one carrying a message to Connor. Alexa's read, "I'm trying to be brave like you taught me, Daddy. I miss you every day." Mine simply said, "I'm keeping my promises to you. We're okay." And we were, in our way, not the same, never the same, but okay. Grief had changed form over that year, from the acute, breathtaking pain of early days to a more persistent ache that flared up at birthdays, anniversaries, and random Tuesday afternoons when a song or scent would bring him rushing back. Using a portion of Connor's life insurance money, we established the Connor Miller Scholarship Fund for underprivileged students interested in finance. The first recipient was a brilliant young woman from the Bronx, whose thank you letter made both Alexa and me cry, then laughed through our tears when she mentioned wanting to specialize in ethical investment practices, something Connor had been passionate about. I'd learned that grief doesn't follow neat stages toward a tidy resolution. It evolves, changes shape, becomes incorporated into your life rather than ruling it entirely. Some days were still unbearably hard, but they were fewer now, spaced between moments of genuine happiness and peace. Alexa showed remarkable resilience, though she still had nights when she would crawl into my bed clutching Connor's old NYU sweatshirt. Her school counselor noted her emotional intelligence, her ability to articulate complex feelings about loss and change. I saw so much of Connor in her analytical approach to problems, the way she would consider all angles before making decisions. But I also saw her developing her own identity distinct from either of us, strong and thoughtful. With Sarah's gentle encouragement, I began reconnecting with friends I'd let drift away during my marriage. Not because Connor had isolated me, but because I'd been so content in our little family unit that I hadn't prioritized other relationships. This was something he'd actually encouraged while alive, telling me that a broader support network would enrich all our lives. 6 months after our confrontation, my parents attempted a more genuine apology. They sent a letter acknowledging their behavior at Isabella's birthday party and after Connor's death. The apology still contained qualifications and explanations, but it was more honest than anything they'd offered before. I responded with boundaries rather than rejection.
I would consider rebuilding a relationship if they respected my autonomy, acknowledged their treatment of me throughout my life, and built a direct relationship with Alexa based on genuine interest in her as a person, not as an extension of me or a connection to Connor's money. They found these conditions difficult, but didn't refuse them outright. We established tentative, limited contact, primarily through occasional phone calls. I no longer expected them to be the parents I'd always wished for, which paradoxically made our interactions less painful. Isabella surprised everyone by breaking her engagement to Sean. The confrontation at my house had apparently triggered deeper conversations between them about values and family dynamics. She began therapy, something she'd always mocked me for considering, and reached out to Alexa with thoughtful gifts related to her interests, not just expensive toys. Our relationship remained complicated, but was slowly evolving into something more authentic than it had ever been. In those months of healing, I came to understand chosen family in a way I never had before. The people who showed up consistently, who offered help without expectation of return, who remembered Connor with love rather than awkward silence. These were our true family. Blood relations mattered less than the bonds forged through genuine care and presence. 14 months after Connor's death, Michael asked me to dinner. Not as Connor's friend checking on his widow, but as a man interested in knowing me better. My first instinct was panic and guilt, as if considering the invitation would somehow betray Connor. I declined, not ready. Michael understood, said the offer remained open if I ever changed my mind, and continued being the supportive friend he'd become. 3 months later, I found myself accepting a rain check on that dinner. It was tentative, fragile, but it was also a step toward a future I hadn't been able to imagine before. When I told Alexa about the dinner, framing it carefully as just 2 adults having a meal together, her response floored me. "Daddy would want you to be happy, Mom," she said, wise beyond her 9 years. "He told me once that love isn't like a pie, where if you give some to one person, there's less for others. He said love just keeps growing the more you share it." It was exactly the kind of thing Connor would have said, his wisdom living on through our daughter. That year taught me lessons I never wanted to learn, at a price I never wanted to pay. I learned that adversity reveals character, both in yourself and in others. My parents and Isabella showed who they truly were in those awful days after Connor's death. But so did Sarah and Barbara and Michael and countless others who stepped up without being asked. I learned that I was stronger than I knew, that I could stand firm even when it meant standing alone, that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for healing, that teaching Alexa to value herself meant demonstrating that I valued myself too. I learned that grief and joy can coexist, that remembering Connor with laughter honored him more than endless tears, though there were still plenty of those too, that moving forward didn't mean leaving him behind. Most importantly, I learned what Connor had tried to teach me throughout our marriage, that family is defined by love, loyalty, and presence, not by blood or obligation. That some relationships need to end for others to flourish. That peace comes not from having everyone approve of you, but from being true to your values, even when it's difficult. The legal threats my parents had made never materialized. Eleanor had been right. They had no grounds to contest Connor's will, and their lawyer had apparently made that clear. But their anger remained, manifesting in stilted phone calls and awkward encounters at family events we both attended. At Alexa's eventual wedding, she'd reconciled with Sean after months of couples therapy. My parents barely spoke to me, but I no longer felt the familiar ache of their disapproval. Alexa, now 10 and radiant in her flower girl dress, charmed everyone with her poise and grace. Several relatives commented on how much she resembled Connor. not just in looks, but in her easy confidence and kind heart. Sean pulled me aside during the reception. "I want to thank you," he said quietly. "What happened at your house, what Alexa did with that letter, it made Isabella and me really examine what we wanted our marriage to be based on. We almost broke up because of it, but we're stronger now. We're building something real." I squeezed his hand. Connor always said the truth has a way of making things clearer, even when it's painful. That conversation stayed with me long after the wedding. Alexa's brave honesty hadn't just protected our family, it had rippled outward, forcing others to confront their own values and choices. 2 years after Connor's death, we moved from our colonial in Westchester to a smaller but sunny apartment in Manhattan. The house had become a museum of memories, beautiful but suffocating. Alexa had initially resisted the change, but quickly fell in love with being able to walk to school and having the city's museums and parks as her backyard. I started my own architectural firm, specializing in sustainable housing design, something Connor had always encouraged me to pursue. The Connor Miller Foundation, which had grown beyond the scholarship program to include financial literacy workshops for underserved communities, became my primary pro bono client. On the third anniversary of Connor's death, Alexa and I returned to Central Park, to the bench where we'd had that first conversation about his death. She was 11 now, all legs and curiosity, still carrying Connor's baseball cap, but wearing it with the confidence of someone who knew she was loved. "Do you think Daddy would be proud of us?" she asked, swinging her legs beneath the bench just as she had 3 years earlier. "I know he would be," I said, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "You've grown into such a wise, kind person. You stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's exactly who he raised you to be." She leaned against my side, comfortable in the silence for a moment. Then, "Mom, do you think we'll ever be close with Grandma and Grandpa again?" It was a question she asked periodically, and each time my answer evolved slightly. "I don't know, sweetheart. They're trying in their way, but real relationships take work from everyone involved. What I do know is that we have so many people who love us exactly as we are. That's the kind of family Daddy always wanted for us." As we walked home through the park, past the pond where Connor had taught Alexa to skip stones, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from our darkest time, the clarity about what truly mattered, the strength I'd discovered in myself, the deep bonds with people who'd proven themselves when it counted. Most precious of all was watching Alexa grow into someone who valued authenticity over approval, who stood up for herself and others with courage and compassion. Connor's greatest legacy wasn't the money he'd left us. It was the values he instilled in his daughter, values that would guide her long after the trust fund was spent. 5 years after Connor's death, I stood in the conference room of my architectural firm, presenting designs for affordable housing to the City Planning Commission. The project was being funded in part by the Connor Miller Foundation, which had grown into one of the region's most respected nonprofits focused on financial education and sustainable housing. As I outlined how the buildings would incorporate energy-efficient design with community spaces that fostered connection, I caught sight of Alexa in the back of the room. Now 13, she'd insisted on coming to see Mom in action. Her presence there, proud and supportive, reminded me of all the times Connor had attended my presentations, beaming from the audience. After the meeting, which resulted in unanimous approval for the project, Alexa linked her arm through mine as we walked to the subway. "That was amazing, Mom," she said. "You're changing people's lives." "We're changing people's lives," I corrected. "This foundation exists because of your father's love and your courage that day when you wrote that letter. Everything good that's come since traces back to you standing up for what was right." She blushed but didn't argue. At 13, Alexa had grown into a remarkable young woman, academically gifted like her father, creatively inclined like me, but most importantly, possessed of a moral compass that pointed steadily toward justice and kindness. The relationship with my parents had evolved into something manageable, if not warm. They'd never fully acknowledged their behavior during those first awful weeks after Connor's death, but they'd stopped making demands and had begun to treating both Alexa and me with genuine respect. Isabella had become something approaching a real sister. Her marriage to Sean was solid, built on honesty rather than fantasy, and she'd grown into someone I actually enjoyed spending time with. She'd even started volunteering with the foundation, using her marketing skills to help us reach more families in need. But the most unexpected development was my relationship with Michael. What had begun as tentative dinners had gradually blossomed into something deep and real. He understood that he wasn't replacing Connor. No one could. But creating something new alongside the love that would always exist for my first husband. When Michael proposed 2 years ago, it was Alexa who insisted we have the ceremony in our memorial garden, surrounded by Connor's sunflowers. Daddy would want to be there, she'd said simply, and this way he will be. The wedding was small, chosen family rather than obligated relatives, and filled with the kind of joy I thought I'd never experience again. During our vows, I looked out at the faces surrounding us. Connor's parents, who'd welcomed Michael with open hearts. Sarah, whose friendship had literally saved my life. Neighbors who'd become family. Colleagues who'd become friends. My parents were there too, sitting stiffly but present. Isabella stood beside me as matron of honor, tears in her eyes as she held the bouquet that included sunflowers from Connor's memorial garden. But it was Alexa who stole the show, reading a poem she'd written about love being like a garden, how new flowers could bloom without diminishing the beauty of those that came before. Now, walking through Manhattan on a crisp October afternoon, I marveled at how far we'd come from that desperate phone call 5 years ago when I'd begged my parents to leave a birthday party to help me through the worst day of my life. "Mom," Alexa said as we descended into the subway station, "I've been thinking about the Foundation's next project." "Oh?" "What if we created a program for kids who've lost parents? Not therapy exactly, but something that teaches them they can still build amazing lives, that grief doesn't have to define them." I stopped walking, struck by the wisdom in her suggestion. "That's brilliant, sweetheart. What made you think of that?" She shrugged, but I could see the deeper thought behind her casual gesture. There are probably lots of kids out there whose families don't show up when they need the most help. Maybe we can teach them what you taught me, that family isn't always who you're born into. Sometimes it's who you choose. As our train pulled into the station, I pulled Alexa into a hug, this remarkable young woman who'd grown from a traumatized 8-year-old into someone who wanted to use her experiences to help others. "You know what, sweetheart? I think we've got our next project." On the ride home, as Alexis sketched ideas for the youth program in her notebook, and I planned the presentation I'd make to our board, I thought about that day when my parents had demanded half of Connor's inheritance. They saw money where they should have seen grief, opportunity where they should have seen obligation. But their betrayal taught Alexa and me something invaluable about the difference between relatives and family. Relatives share DNA. Family shares life. Relatives show up when it's convenient. Family shows up when it matters. Relatives keep score. Family keeps faith. The money Connor left us indeed changed our lives, but not in the way my parents had imagined. It hadn't made us wealthy in the traditional sense. Most of it had been invested in the foundation and Alexa's education fund. Instead, it had given us something far more precious: the freedom to build a life based on values rather than obligations. on chosen relationships rather than inherited ones. As we climbed the stairs to our apartment, past the photos lining the walls that told the story of our blended family, Connor's memories alongside new ones with Michael, foundation events mixed with everyday moments, chosen family celebrations, I reflected on the letter that had changed everything. An 8-year-old's honest words had not only protected our family's legacy, but had forced everyone around us to confront what they truly valued. Some had chosen love, others had chosen money. The choices they made had determined who remained in our lives and who became just distant relatives we saw at weddings and funerals. That night, as I tucked Alexa to bed, a ritual we'd maintained despite her protest that she was too old for it, she asked the question that had become our evening tradition. "What do you think Daddy would say about today?" I considered it seriously, as I always did. "I think he'd say he's proud of the woman you're becoming and amazed by the life we've built. I think he'd say that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the people who love you authentically. And I think he'd say that his greatest investment wasn't in stocks or bonds, but in teaching his daughter to value character over cash, courage over comfort." Alexa smiled and hugged Connor's old baseball cap, which still held a place of honor on her nightstand. "I love you, Mom. And I love our family, all of it. Even the messy parts." "Even the messy parts," I agreed, kissing her forehead. As I turned off her light and headed to my own room where Michael was already reading, I paused at the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there were other families facing impossible choices, other children learning hard truths about who they could count on, other people discovering that sometimes the family you need isn't the one you were born into. Tomorrow, Alexa and I would start our youth program. We'd create something beautiful from the ashes of our tragedy, just as Connor had always taught us to do. We'd teach other children what a brave 8-year-old had taught her own family, that love is the only currency that really matters, and real family shows up when it matters most. Have you ever experienced family choosing something less important over being there for you in a crisis? Did you also have to learn the hard lesson that sometimes the people who should love you the most can be the most disappointing? Share your story in the comments. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more true life stories and share with someone who might need to hear that chosen family can be more powerful than blood ties. Thank you for listening to Sadie's journey, and may you find peace in your own, whatever it may look like.